A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mangushampagi. And with me tonight, I'd like to introduce a male all panel, starting with Angelo Izama. Angelo, very nice to have you back here.
Thank you, Charles.
You make disappearances and people keep asking where you are.
When I'm a non-resident in some other country.
Yes.
So, like most Ugandans, we are roaming the globe looking for a payday.
Thank you.
And that's what we're doing.
Mr. Mohamed Nsereko is Member of Parliament for Kampala Central. Very nice to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure, and good evening, viewers.
Sanjay Tana is a former Member of Parliament and a businessman, social commentator and critic. Very nice to have you.
Thank you, Charles, and a very good evening to the listeners out there.
And Ivan Okuda, who is a journalist with the Daily Monitor and a student at Makerere Law School.
Profoundly humbled. Thank you, Charles, and a very good evening to our viewers.
Gentlemen, it's been an event-packed week. One of the major events of the week was that the story about police torture refuses to go away, so we'll be discussing that. We'll also be discussing the story of the switch off of unregistered or unverified telephone SIM cards. Interestingly, I mentioned this to one of my friends within the police force. I was trying to make contact with some senior police officers, and I found their numbers had been switched off. So I was wondering who exactly didn't register or verify, because I found quite a few had not had their phone switched off. We'll be discussing that, and of course, but we'll need to start with what some people would want to call the passing, but I call it a celebration of the life of Mzee Boniface Byanyima, 1920 to 2017. Boniface Byanyima was laid to rest this afternoon at his home in Ruti. One of his daughters, describing how they ended up in Ruti, gave a very interesting example of the hills in Imbarara and the fights, especially religious, that existed in that area many years ago in the 1960s. One hill belonging to Anglicans, another hill belonging to Catholics, where he picked his wife. He was Anglican, and he built in the middle on a hill that was dominated by Muslims, and they gave him the land where he lived. Let's start with the Byanyima story. One of the major discussions about the Byanyima story, Angelo, has been that how do you discuss a life lived exemplarily, as another sage, Dr. Paul Kawanga Semoge, writes in the Sunday Vision today, eulogizes Mzee Byanyima in the Sunday Vision, without infusing a dose of politics, yet he lived almost all his life as a political actor.
Well, it's the passing of an era. There are few like him who are left. I always feel bad that it's only when people like him die that for a moment people look back at the unreported history, because as journalists we are historians in a hurry. So the news that we are interested in is current affairs. And for years, I remember at the Monitor we interviewed the late Byanyima several times. He had a very interesting relationship to most of the contemporary actors and events. And his family, I think, perhaps even in the last 50 years now, given the political activity of his daughters and his son-in-law, who is in the opposition, he's one of the, if you like, prominent political families that have become like a defining feature of Ugandan contemporary political competition. But he was always someone who I felt stood above what has been the main political issues of the last 20-25 years around the presidency of Yoweri Museveni. And I always thought that he did it essentially based upon his own reading of things, his ethical disposition. But there are few like him who are left, and my own personal disappointment, at least with the journalism around the obituaries, is that we capture so little of the background, the conversations he's had with like I know very little about how he really felt about, you know, his children and their affairs and their approach to politics and the kind of advice that he gave. People really sought him out aggressively to hear how he, you know, what kind of advice he offered these people who have come to dominate our politics.
Honorable Muhammad Nsereko, the passing of Boniface Byanyima, the eulogies, I sat and watched the funeral proceedings, especially today, listened to the family especially. The eulogy of the president, which was delivered by Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sam Kutesa, they had a very personal relationship because Byanyima became a member of parliament for DP in 1961. 20 years later, Sam Kutesa won the DP ticket with Byanyima's endorsement and a part of Byanyima's constituency. So when Sam Kutesa stood up to speak, he spoke of the relationship. One, he delivered a written statement from the president, and then went to his own personal relationship and his politics. Then Kizza Besigye came and spoke. Then the children came and spoke. And Winnie Byanyima, who's wife of Kizza Besigye, went full blast political and said, members of the ruling National Resistance Movement, do not use your numbers. You should not dare use your numbers to change the constitution. And he said, when we go into another election in 2021, President Museveni's time will be up. And he said, NRM members, do not dare use your numbers to change the constitution. So the discussion around Byanyima, and like many people went to him and consulted him over the years, his funeral obviously had to end on a high political note. From your own perspective, he remained consistent, refused to leave the Democratic Party when everyone else was crossing.
Well, that is a good thing to do. Of course, we all sympathize with the family of the late Byanyima, but like Zama said, that was a different crop of politicians playing in different times, and yeah, probably because it stuck to his principle. If you said that in Kenya, everyone would laugh at you, that someone remained in, let's say, KANU for as long as KANU left. I mean, it depends on the political landscape. The most important thing is the values for me. Whether he stood and remained in the Democratic Party, which he participated in its formation, rightly so, as a person who participated in the formation of the Democratic Party, wanted to see it grow, wanted to see it in leadership, saw it through a wave of harassment in the 80s, in the 60s, and the others. So for him, it was a party politically close to him, but those that were close to him can have much better things to say about that. But for the entire country, we've lost a person that was there who contributed to our decolonization, to acquisition of our independence. How many of them are still there that actually participated in the post-colonial era immediately leadership of this country, meaning they formed the basis of what they wanted Uganda to be, Uganda from the hands of the white person to the hands of indigenous Ugandans. Therefore, when the first statement that touched my heart was actually Byanyima saying that we need a peaceful change in this country, and I think that's touching. From a family like you've described it, it's been a political family from father to children, and it's being passed on. Which is
the grandchildren. One of the granddaughters gave a very interesting speech on behalf of...
Which is very good for the family, that they are leaving a legacy where they understand most. But as a teacher, someone who taught people, those that he taught in different schools, including standing surety for the president, like the president said, that means he valued education. Those are things we should learn from him, for me. Value for education and quality education now.
Let me just start with a quick question just before you conclude your thought on Byanyima. Why are you, as the new crop of politicians, different from the crop of the Byanyimas? And what difference does it make that Byanyimas fought for independence,
yes,
remained consistent, there is no shade of accusation on him about of being corrupt or being negligent of his responsibilities, either as a teacher or as a member of parliament. And if you compare his generation his politics and your politics because you're a current member of parliament.
Yes. No, I have no problem about that. Everyone will be judged by their own action. I don't know what the world will talk about us in the future, but we are trying to give all our all. When I speak for a current trader in the city, I'm speaking for someone who has voted me in these times. And if I stand for low taxes and someone stands for high taxes, if I stand for low interest rates, the landscape has completely changed. The time Byanyima was in parliament, we are not talking about international bailouts and things of that nature. But what we want to say is the values. Fighting for the common good is what you're talking about. But the greed in politics has grown, and we have to accept it's not the same landscape as it was. Look at a situation where members of parliament would come and they would be housed during their times. Apart from being given a brand new car like it was, there were few, they would be housed. We come into a political landscape where every single small unit is crying to be a district, and the president accepts, is trying to have a representative in parliament, and parliament accepts. Therefore, there is a lot of selfish interest surrounding what is there today.
Okay.
And who in parliament would you tell that let's go back to the 1962 borderlines of the constituencies? Probably you'll find Kampala Central and a few that we've inherited. Therefore, the times they lived are not the current times. Look at the period of peace that they had vis-a-vis the periods that we've had. Then the periods of...
the issues you stand for, have they changed? The issues a political leader should stand for, have they
the
changed?
values have not changed.
Yes.
The issues have completely changed.
Okay. Sanjay, you were in parliament, you're not now in parliament. we are eulogizing a stage political actor.
In my own opinion, okay, I would like to take this opportunity and, of course, this platform to offer my condolences to the family. I knew some of them personally. I want to differ from my brother here. When we look at the late Mzee Byanyima, this is a man in whose house the president grew up.
That
spent
fact has been disputed.
Yes,
for different versions of it.
For a few years, or he helped get education. Over whom he had fair amount of influence by the time he was a child. He was a member of DP. You have just talked about Honorable Sam Kutesa. We know of many senior army commanders. We know of many members of parliament. We know of many ministers who then shed off their original colors to join the new government that had taken over in 1986, both for personal gains and for what Honorable Nsereko has said, to deliver to their people. But this is an old man who stood his ground and who stood for his principles. I mean, had he wanted, then he had everything at his disposal. But because of his principles, he lived by what he spoke. He lived by what he thought. And to me, that is a world apart. If you look at many of his colleagues, many from northern Uganda, from eastern, from central here, they all jumped onto the bandwagon
and across the aisle
and served both personal interests and whatever. This is a unique character who had all the opportunities and refused and stuck by his gun. He went a step ahead. In his own opinion, every time the government erred, in his own opinion, he was bold enough to come and express his views. We have several leaders, past and present, who see certain things going wrong, but will opt to keep quiet. But this old man was cut from a different cloth, as the Englishman says. And that is what I admire most about him and till his last days, he was very, very categoric. And of course, all the other values, like my colleagues here have said, his interest in education, his interest in empowering his people, his interest in being the change agent on for people's lives. He, like you mentioned in your preamble, his interest in playing the religious balance and living by it all through his life. And he's a character. If you sat down to analyze into details, it would take us days before we would come out with a list of qualities which we must emulate.
Let me come quickly to Ivan Okuda and ask the question that what many people have been asking or saying about Boniface Byanyima is our politics has gone wrong. Our politics is wrong. But he stood through so many changes in our political life as a country, pre-independence, through independence, to today. And I think people like Winnie, people like Kizza Besigye, we're talking about the need to correct the politics of today. Is there a magic wand? Is there something that can change the politics as we see them today? Because I think at the Parliament eulogy, after the Parliament eulogy, was it Dr. Kizza Besigye or someone else who said there's little to admire about the Parliament as it is today?
Charles, allow me join the rest of the panel to convey heartfelt condolences to the family of Mzee Boniface Byanyima and wish his soul to rest in eternal peace. My own view is essentially shaped by 3 interviews that I read this week with Mzee Byanyima, done a few years ago. One run in the Daily Monitor, an interview that was done in 2013, and another which I think was my favorite by Herbert Benon Oluka in the Observer, which an interview I think any of us should pick interest in, and in which the old man, number one, shared his frustration with Ugandan politics, observed over a period of half a century. And he said it's so frustrating that a person like him, even if he had another opportunity to join politics, would reject the opportunity because you have highly divisive politics, you have to disagree and to be in opposition is criminal, there's a lot of torment, and I was actually surprised in the Observer interview when he compares Milton Obote and Mr. Museveni and says Mr. Obote had his excesses, but Mr. Museveni has gone so far overboard. And he gives Obote a lot of credit for endeavoring to build a semblance of parliamentary democracy, and not have what, in his own words, is a paper parliament. But also the Sunday Monitor has published a copy of, parts and bits from the Hansard.
From the Hansard.
Yes, excerpts from the Hansard, which I think speak to me so eloquently, because in what Mzee Byanyima said in 1962, 63, 64, and the years ahead, the issues that he raised are still potent in our politics to date, and even getting worse. One of which, an issue that he raised in 1964 was the debate on the public service. And he passionately spoke about the discrimination in and the killing of meritocracy, and essentially shifting allocation of jobs to which political party you belong to. And his argument was the UPC cannot have a bigger say than in respect to government jobs than people from the DP and other shades of political opinion, because we all pay taxes and we should have an entitlement as citizens of this country to a share of the national cake. And when you read those excerpts, that's a point that he repeatedly brought up in Parliament. That's a point that he repeatedly made in the interviews that he gave subsequently in the Monitor, in the Observer, and other platforms. And you get the feeling that this was a man who was passionate about broad-based outlook to politics, to respect divergence of opinion, and to recognize that we all can't have a one-size-fits-all outlook to governance. And to that extent, you have, since 1962, the country to date, and even getting worse, where it is almost criminal to disagree with the status quo. It's almost criminal to take on the regime on everyday issues, which even the president, for example, clearly admits in public. And for example, if you're Laro Tun, you'll not become Secretary General of the UN because you just have a different shade of opinion. If you are a member of the FDC, you almost cannot do business in your own country. If you're a member of the Democratic Party and you stand out unless you've been compromised or you've struck a deal with the president, you almost can't do business.
These two guys look very wealthy.
So it's
and we know that
they disagree with
there are moments when they have been on the other side.
And these are the issues the Byanyimas were speaking in the 1960s, and they continue to disturb our politics. And I think that, for me, is a point of reflection for us as a country, to essentially say we don't seem to be making progress.
We need to take a break, but let me just allow. Mohamed Nsereko initially was elected on the NRM ticket. Then when he stood again, he is an independent NRM leaning. That's what I've heard. That's how they've been describing you. Sanjay Tana.
Independence is independent. You can't be leaning left or right or center.
No, we have seen the independent caucus sometimes signing MOUs in that parliament.
Well,
this and the previous parliament. So we've seen that. Sanjay Tana was also independent for the 2 terms he served. 3 terms? 2 terms he served in parliament, but was also NRM leaning.
No.
You see, you can't be leaning.
You see, the constitution is very clear. By the way, if you attend, there was a court case that where there was a ruling that if you go and attend the party caucus, then you lose your seat. There is a court ruling on that, and the stand is clear. You cannot be independent and leaning or. But you see where people.
Is that the truth in the parliament?
That's what I want to. That's what I want to explain to you. That as a member of parliament, it is okay for me to be friends with Honorable Nsereko. It is okay for Honorable Nsereko to be friends, like you have seen when we're in the canteen. We sit with each other and talk. Whether it's from opposition, whether it's from government, it's okay. As a member of parliament, you must lobby for services, for delivery to your people. And those services are given out by the ministers of the ruling government. So if you do not build a relationship, and you say, because I was elected independent, you are going to stand there like a pole, alone. You are not going to be able to deliver for your people.
People used to describe you as an accidental politician, but now you're proving that you're an actual politician. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be discussing torture in the Uganda police force. We'll be right back. You're still watching the Fourth Estate. The subject of torture. Let me start with the Member of Parliament, Mohamed Nsereko. Parliament has debated or discussed torture. You dispatched a team to Nalufenya, which is being described as the new torture chamber run by the Uganda Police Force. Someone I respect in security circles told me this evening that actually the story of Nalufenya that we hear is or might be a little bit different than how it's being discussed. But he agrees and says the police has boxed itself into a very difficult situation because of the images that have emerged and the testimonies of some of the suspects especially are related to the murder of Andrew Felix Kaweesi, the former AIGP. As a member of parliament, what do you make of these stories about torture in the Uganda Police Force in 2017?
Well, torture as a means of extraction of information is one of the most archaic, primitive, and degrading as well as inhuman acts that are committed by both state actors and non-state actors. It's been condemned way back before, as far as 1949, after the formation of the United Nations, when they were revising again the Geneva Convention, the set of rules that govern the administration of prisoners, prisoners of war, and any other people within the custody of both government and non-state actors. It was classified as a crime against humanity. Now, in 2006, when they revised further, they decriminalized even in any detention center, to the extent that even holding someone beyond the hours without giving them access to lawyers tantamounts to torture. mental, as you may think. Incarcerating people in isolated facilities without access to food, to light, or any other things is absolutely wrong. Now, if it includes what we witnessed in the entire country, to children, women, these are the most protected groups of society, that even during war, it's criminalized to go after them by the use of force, whether in evacuation or in combat. Now, what transpired and what the country saw was actually part of a story that was broken by NTV. It started with the children, and no one knew what was going on around this. Then, further to that, was the revelation of this gentleman, the suspect, and then the Amukama. Then there was conflicting reports from the Uganda Police Force on how it was handled, and tempers flared. But the issue, whether it's in law from Article 24 of our own Constitution, it is unacceptable. It is degrading, it's inhuman, and it's unacceptable within the laws of Uganda. When you go to Article 28, the right to a fair hearing. Every person is presumed innocent until proven guilty, or until one pleads guilty themselves.
You sit in Parliament, you appropriate the police budget, you appropriate budgets to other security agencies. I hope you have read the numerous reports of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, and especially the award for torture by the state, the awards that the Uganda Human Rights Commission has been giving to people who have been tortured by the state. Just recently, the Inspector General of Police, who is under the spotlight, was presented before you in Parliament, and his term was renewed. Why don't we see this discussion? Why don't we see this debate coming out on the floor of Parliament?
Our rules of procedure are different in handling. That is the role of the Appointments Committee, that then reports to the House after. And it does not actually even have to report to the House of its findings. So members of the public can petition, or including individual members of Parliament. Now, the Appointments Committee is practically dominated by the members of the National Resistance Movement. In most cases, it would be hard for them to come up with a decision that is otherwise. You remember the issues of the ministers that were there, that were appointed in the 9th Parliament, Honorable Nantaba and others. When the chairman stood his ground, they came and passed every single person. Therefore, what am I trying to say? Not that they cannot perform their duties, but Ugandans should also accept that the Sanjay's, the Nserekos are not very many in that parliament. These people that come to parliament that are sponsored by the NRM, they can hardly put up a spirited fight on certain matters. And you have to accept this, because these are the Ugandans you sent in parliament. Therefore, I'm trying to tell you the reality before you even talk about the budget and everything.
Yes.
Then, parliamentary work is also run through committees. Now, the committee that oversees the budget of the Uganda Police Force, primarily, and its operations, is the Defense and Internal Affairs Committee. Therefore, it interfaces with them. Recently, they were there, and the issue was introduced by Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi and many others. It was discussed, but their reports on the floor of Parliament have not arrived. But in any case, Parliament went ahead through an issue of national concern and through the Prime Minister's question to address the matter. We requested for a report from the Minister, but as well instructed the Minister that the people that are under detention illegally be freed. The Speaker also directed that the Committee on Human Rights goes and ascertains the facts on the ground, because Parliament before has been blamed for not first carrying out investigations and coming up with conclusions.
So you're happy with what is going on?
No, the issue is, before they report back to Parliament, I don't want to be the accuser and the judge. Now, when they report back to Parliament, we shall also give our findings. For example,
but
there is a lady...
You're speaking like this is a new thing.
There is a lady called... You're also speaking like it's a new thing. We are discussing the issue like it has not been there before. Therefore, we share the same blame.
The media has been reporting...
I wish we were not discussing this, because you introduced it.
No, I mean, the media has been reporting it. Torture has been present. and persistent.
I agree with you.
Yes.
I agree with you. And it, even in the 9th Parliament, the issue was raised. This is not the first time of incarceration of people beyond the mandatory hours of detention.
Okay, let me
Now, the issue, for me...
But just to support his argument, because I've been in the House and I understand how it works, Charles, you must appreciate, and on a personal note, I want to congratulate this Parliament on this particular issue. I have several other issues, maybe, but on this particular issue, I want to congratulate the Speaker and the members of Parliament who took a strong stand on this matter. Charles, you must understand that we have seen pictures given to us by the media. We have seen interviews of people who are purportedly tortured.
Who are tortured, not purported?
No, allow me to speak my mind. You may have evidence. I don't have evidence. So that's why I'm saying purported.
You didn't say the ones of those who spoke in court.
It's okay. That one was okay. But I've also seen others who I have not been able to talk to, or who I haven't seen speaking. I have just read stories about, both on social media and on print media. So I want to support the stand of Parliament that it is important to go and ascertain. You see, it's easy for us to sit in this air-conditioned room and blame, put a blanket blame on our security agencies. But you must understand that the people who are in these security agencies are also human beings. And there could be bad human beings who are part of that security force. Like the President openly said the other day, that they are criminals within the police force. Now, the question that comes to my mind as a layman is, the President has powers. He has the apparatus at his disposal to weed out these bad ones. Why isn't that happening? That is my question.
You can't be asking that question to me.
No. I'm asking you aloud.
Opportunity.
No. Hold on, Charles. So for you to blame Parliament, Parliament at this stage wants to go and see. It is very important to establish, is the torture institutionalized, or is it individual elements within the security forces?
You're a former member of Parliament.
I was supplementing his point.
Just a moment.
You were attacking. No. Your attack mode was on Parliament.
No,
and the Honorable Serekolia has told us, Honorable Sereko has told us that the parliamentary committee went to ascertain. I would be very happy to come back on your show to come here to debate the report.
Just hold it for a minute. You spent 10 years in Parliament, sent by the citizens, the voters of Tororo
Municipality.
Tororo Municipality.
Yes, sir.
In that Parliament.
Yes, sir.
In your 10 years, and the time now you've been out of Parliament since 2016. Yes, since 2016. Do you think this torture is institutionalized? Do you think it is individuals? Do you think it's individual rogue elements? What is it?
No, to me, in my own opinion, my humble opinion, and this opinion has been clearly documented on the Hansard of Parliament. First of all, I think that our security forces are some of the finest in the world. Forget about Africa. And that position of mine is clear. If at all, maybe Ivan may not be old enough, but you and Honorable Sereko and Angelo know that 15 years ago, you would not get a traffic officer standing at Ginger Road traffic lights at this time. Today you will find them there working. At that time they would work for the day. At 5 p.m. they wrap up and go away. There has been a change, gradual change in the force.
Honorable Sereko,
in the operations of the force.
Honorable Sereko, do you agree?
At that time,
no,
let me finish. At that time, you would find them with uniforms of Kiraka. Now they have proper uniforms. You would find them without shoes, now they have shoes. You would find them without fuel. You call a police station, thieves are breaking in, they say, send me transport. At that time, we didn't have even mobile money.
Well,
Now, today, there has been that change.
Is Nsereko wants to
So-
come
so-
in?
so
Is it-
in-
is it-
Are you
is it-
coming, Charles?
Yes,
In-
and
in
Angelo and
this-
Ivan wants to come
in
in.
this particular case, we are referring to the element of torture.
Okay.
In my own opinion, you asked me a question.
Angelo, if you could allow me and Ivan to
Yes.
just one second for Honorable Nsereko. Do you think you've been a member of Parliament? This is your third term?
Yes.
This is my
Second term in Parliament. Do you think this torture is institutionalized or the actions of rogue elements in the security forces?
Well, of course you can.
You access privileged information better than I and Angelo and Ivan do.
I can tell you this, that I don't know any single country that institutionalizes torture, because then it will be embedded in the constitution of the republic. In any case, our constitution condemns torture. Therefore, you
There's an
can't
act
say
against it, actually.
it is an act against it. So
2012
therefore,
is
for
an
me
act
to even say it's institutionalized,
Let
that
me
means
let me
it's
rephrase my
embedded
question. Thank you.
in an act.
Let me rephrase my
Are
question.
there state actors that are perpetrating torture?
Let
Is
me
that what
rephrase
you
my
want
question.
to
Thank you
ask?
very much for because I think I asked the wrong question. Let me rephrase my question.
Correct.
Do you think that torture is common practice among security agencies or isolated incidents of individual rogue elements?
It is both.
It is both.
It cannot be either.
Let me have
Because
Angelo come in
let me
there.
just
Yes.
give you
Sure.
a simple thing that I really consider as torture. Incarceration of someone beyond 48 hours
It's torture.
And then-
is torture, and I can tell you, in many police stations you see this going on. We've talked
Very
about
casually,
this.
by the
It has even become casual. I mean, they pick you up. You have no. Oh, someone alleges something. You're picked up. Maybe it's a land wrang or something, and someone casually says we are still investigating.
Okay.
Therefore, for me, part of it is due to the unprofessional conduct of many of the officers. But some officers are really genuine, and when you step there, they even tell you it's not us, it is someone. Someone said that that person should be here. Therefore, the degree of impunity is continuing to grow. Therefore, what do I think? In Parliament, there is always an eye-opener. In Parliament, we should continue to discuss this matter by documenting. Police should now document, and we should seek
Put
these
them to
questions.
task.
Put them to task. I'm really now very inquisitive about this issue. Put the minister to task to tell us how many prisons. Have you ever been to prison?
No.
Do you know what happened?
Not as a prisoner.
Oh.
I've been to prison to
As a
visit
visitor?
people. Yes.
Every 2 hours, they come and count and inform the OC that we have this number of prisoners, so and so on criminals, so and so on remand, so and so on convicts, so and so on judgment debtors. Can the minister all the time, and these are the questions that will come up after this, tell us how many people have been, for every single month that comes in, how many people have been in prison? I mean, detained,
In detention, because
in
prison is a
detention,
different institution. Yes.
even in prison, because that's under internal affairs. In detention, for how long, for what offences they have committed, and if we get account of this data, then we'll be giving perfect accountability.
Angelo, isn't the police being put in a very difficult position to deal with increasing criminality when you have these allegations of torture emerging the way they have?
I think you have to separate the two issues. So the criminal justice system we have obviously requires a lot more work. Over the years, of course, the population has increased, but I've been speaking to security managers, and the general consensus is that the training of police officers is wanting. Their conditions require more money. They have to be housed better. They have to be paid better. But particularly when you think about professionalization, let me give you an example of say CID officers. In the 70s, if you meet someone who joined the force, CID officers would be they would be headhunted from university. For you to be on the path to be a detective inspector, you'd have to pass your university exams, and then there would be a short list that the public service would offer. And then what happens is that the people in charge would go and say, we want Charles Mangushia, we want Ivan. CID and Special Branch would compete for the best brains. But it would take about 6 years, actually, for you to get your badge. If you're a member of the Special Branch, you would have gone through police recruitment, police training, gone through the desk, taken your assignments under supervision for 2 years. All of these things would be documented on your file up to a point where you're able to independently handle your own cases. The progression is about 6 years. We do not have this kind of system anymore. And if you look at the over 4,000 unresolved murder cases and the case backlog for other cases within the court system and in the remand system, which is a terrible system, by the way, we have not been able to set the clock back to a point where the criminal justice system delivers actual justice. But that is a separate issue from impunity. Impunity is something that the police, that has corrupted the police force, largely because the way the force has come under pressure from disagreements within politics in Uganda, particularly over the last 20 years. It has put the police in a position where they now have to be partisan in the way they instrumentalize justice. So justice has become something which you can access if you belong to this or that political organization. But I think in the last 5 years, it's become worse. The impunity has now, the officers who, the police, the security system operates on a system of superior orders. That system has been broken down by politics. You find DPCs who are bigger than their bosses. You have got uncommissioned officers, irregular people who have got authority over the police, over the intelligence services, and that is being supplied largely from politics. And there has to be an effort to do both things, Charles. One is to put the proper resources into professionalizing that force, but also to insulate it from politics, and that is really, I think, the elephant in the room. Is how you can have.
Let me have Ivan come in quickly before I come to you, because we also need to take a break. Our time is not very good. Ivan, the latest explosion of that has put police in the spotlight is interestingly a non-partisan matter. There's been times when we've debated police and its handling of political opponents, but the latest allegations are on a purely criminal matter. Where does that leave the police and General Kale Kayihura holding it?
Ivan, let me take 2 seconds of your time. Because I'm right now writing, sort of documenting some of the atrocities over the years. But I've noticed actually that torture tends to spike in Uganda's history whenever political pressures are high. If you look at the 1976 report of Idi Amin on the disappearances, that was because this regime was under pressure. Same thing in the 80s under Obote. But anytime you approach a transitional moment, the security
what are you suggesting? That President Museveni's government is under pressure now?
Of course. We know that the government is under
let's
strong
not be unfair to Ivan.
pressure.
I need to give you a little bit more time to explain yourself. So let's take the break. When we come back, I'll just start with you. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this last segment where we'll conclude the discussion on torture, but also have a brief discussion on the switch off of telephones by the Uganda Communications Commission order to mobile telephone service providers over registration and verification. But just a few messages from some of our viewers. Nteji Asimwe says, just like we have bad apples in the media who take bribes and are paid to destroy other people, there must be wrong elements in any other institution in Uganda. I don't know what the gentleman in the studio make of that. Then Madrine is watching us and she says, what will happen when the tortured people are not proved to have participated in that Kawesi murder? What happens to them? And then there is Jose Nwabine, I think in Kavulari Antonde, who says, I am compelled to believe that these cases of torture are politically motivated. Would I be wrong to think that people who met out this kind of torture are enemies of this regime putting on police uniform. It's no wonder one of the people tortured is an NRM chairperson. Maybe majority of those tortured are NRM. They're members of parliament here. They should help us. They're political actors, the ex-political actors, which we are not, and maybe they might help us, give us some direction. And then we need a technical team to check. One of the viewers, Margaret Baguma, is asking, what has happened to NTV? I don't know what has happened. I think, okay, the technical team are telling me that DSTV had dropped us for a moment, but we are back on, so you should continue to enjoy the show. I think I'll use this comment later when we go into that discussion. Ivan, you had a moment just before I took the break. Isn't Kaihura and the police fixed in a corner now over, because this is non-political?
I wouldn't want to focus on Kaihura, but essentially the politics. Charles Onyango wrote a piece which I wish to associate my views with, that essentially traces torture from as far back as colonial time, but specifically gives it more emphasis with respect to the Milton Obote regime, especially Obote II, Idi Amin, and Mr. Museveni, but specifically focusing on President Museveni, who rose to power in 1986 against the backdrop of lots of bloodshed in the Luero sub-region and other parts of the country where that war was raging. And after taking power, Mr. Museveni, who as a student of violence, essentially perfected the art of violence and thrives on violence and is not afraid to unleash violence. So essentially we've built a culture where torture is condoned and abated by the powers that be.
His statement midweek,
I'm coming to that.
To disagree with.
Yes, let me come to that.
Your view.
And because when you read the stories being published in the papers and look at the photos coming out, there's nothing fundamentally different from what used to happen in Teso sub-region when the NRA went on counterinsurgency operations, in Choli sub-region, in Lango sub-region, and in West Nile, in Karamoja. And the president, not so many years ago, stood up somewhere in Eastern Uganda in Busoga and said, yes, it's true, atrocities were committed by the NRA, stroke UPDF, and the officers in those operations will be brought to book. He mentioned Mukura, for example, the Mukura massacre in Teso.
That was during the campaigns that returned him to power.
And parts of Acholi. And to this day, the officers who used excessive force in treating civilians, including women and children, have never been brought to book. So Mr. Museveni's regime essentially sits on skeletons of thousands of Ugandans who have been victims of the excesses of this regime, and there's been no attempt to deliberately bring people to book. So essentially what you have what is happening in the police and other security agencies that we're discussing now is a spillover of a system that condones and abets the excessive use of power. Because, for example, if you read the president's letter, it's essentially not speaking to stern action to be taken. It's not even condemnatory. All he does is essentially give a historical background and context to torture and trying to explain it essentially playing to the gallery and pretend to be concerned about torture that's going on. But that later falls short of taking stern action. Because, for example, the Independent, Charles Bichachi, who is now executive at the Monitor, John Njoroge, who then was at the Independent, and Andrew Mwenda and team, did a fantastic job profiling safe houses in this country and what was happening. Horrific stories, more than we even read today. The Monitor, when Andrew Mwenda and team were still there in the prime time, did incredible stories exposing the rot in safe houses and the use of torture by CMI, by ISO, by all security agencies. And by that time, the police was not even a mainstream instrument of the use of torture as a method of extraction of information. And to this day, there is no single officer that you can say has ever been brought to book by this regime for the use of torture. But more importantly, Charles, if you look at even the police processes, because Hassan Kasinyo, who is the spokesman of the police force, says, and even the IGP and other senior police officers, we always bring this people to book. The people that beat up BSJ supporters were taken to the police court. But that in itself is ridiculous, because by its own construction, the police court is a disciplinary measure. to try police officers accused of torture in a disciplinary tribunal is in itself laughable, because these guys committed acts of criminality.
That's true.
If you read the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Act. So what you're doing is, because the disciplinary tribunal will possibly suspend them, give them a demotion or another reprimand.
Yeah, but
If
they also
you-
have
if-
they have the option of handing
Yes.
them over to the public.
Yes, but
prosecutor.
that's not happening. So essentially, there is not, apart from public relations stance, no substantial commitment
To disciplining,
discipline
people
police
back
officers.
at the
But Charles
yes,
also,
I want to
just
disagree
lastly,
with,
lastly,
Ivan.
let me just finish. I spent this afternoon interviewing alongside senior human rights lawyer Justus Rwakafuzi, somebody who's just been released from Nalufenya detention facility. And it's a very horrific story, which essentially speaks to partly the politics behind torture, because as a journalist, my interest is in the profiles of the people being tortured. Who are they? What are the offenses? Usually have, for example, the killing of Muslim clerics in this country. I've interviewed young men, and most of them are Muslims, who have scars and evidence that's documented in court, because many of them have challenged the government and are telling you we were tortured and told to confess we're behind the
killing.
assassination of Sheikh Kiri and Sheikh so and so. Now, the person that we interviewed today, and this matter will be filed in court tomorrow, because we're basically trying to come up with pleadings for the matter. This gentleman is arrested, taken to Nalufenya, tortured, and an offer is made to him to make a confession to the effect that on the 2nd of March, he was approached by Minister of Security, Henry Tumukunde, and asked to get a team of mercenaries who can kill IGP Kale Kaihura and Felix Kawes. And this gentleman refuses. And I'm free to say this because these are things on court record, and so it's basically public information that, so no holds barred. So this gentleman declines to make that confession. And if you read the story broken by the Investigator website, the mayor from Kamwenge, who was tortured, also had a connotation of...
I think the correct title is LC3 chairperson.
Yes,
yes.
yes, thank you. That gentleman also claims he was told to confess General Tumukunde was behind this murder. So essentially, my appreciation... Yes, but my appreciation of it is you have fights in the security forces. General Tumukunde, on the other hand, of course, they publicly deny they're not fighting, but if you read between the lines what they say about each other, you clearly see there is animosity. And General Kale Kaihura on this side, and torture now essentially being used as a means of pinning,
fixing squad,
fixing the other. The same applies to, for example, people like Aggrey Chinji, because I know people that have been tortured and told to confess they're working with Aggrey Chinji. So even then, you're using torture not as a means of extracting information to deal with criminality, but to play intrigue and politics within the security forces. And above all this, it's the president, who is fully aware as the biggest consumer of crude and refined intelligence that all this is happening, and he seems to be enjoying the drama.
Angela, you said you disagreed with it.
Yeah, one, because I think that, well, if you look at historically, the claim that he's making that, you know, under the Museveni regime, you have had a history of violence that was more. You just have to go and read the Justice Arthur Oda report. There are about 6 or 7 volumes of testimony there, going back 1962. But I have never read anything as bad as what happened in the Amin and Obote regimes. Yeah, this is what's happening today by contrast. But also,
could that be partly because when you have a regime still in power, just a moment.
You can't imagine,
when you have a regime still in power, of course, there will be extremely limited information. So maybe one thing
not even that. In fact, let me bust that bubble, because in the case of Idi Amin and in the case of Milton Obote, there were many opportunities to conceal information. Today, well, information is much more readily available.
Exactly, and at that time there was no technology for disseminating.
But I also want to take
and disseminate the information.
I also take exception to his characterization of the scale the institution of due process, by the way, even with their imperfections, are loaded on this side of history, including all the laws we have cited, the public commitments.
Yeah.
Today, we have but you have to.
What are laws if not respected?
But this is what I was saying is that we can discuss the rise in impunity, and I agree with you that the stock of impunity is concentrated when pressures are from politics, when there is unsupervised use of violence for personal reasons. You see, and that is something that
no,
the
but
public must
allow me to come in for a moment, just Angelo. You see, gentlemen, let us also analyze. I like Angelo's submission. He's brought in the historical perspective. Let us analyze what is the kind of criminal that the police force or the security agencies today are dealing with, vis-a-vis the criminal that the other security agencies were dealing with.
But you're assuming the criminal.
No. Allow me to build my point.
Would you invert that question and say, what is the kind of police vis-a-vis the police that exists?
Exactly. So therefore, it is the situation that demands the action.
It is
For example, if you remember, gentlemen, we had a very soft police force, and there was a huge crime wave where the president then had to bring in army men and put in an operation called Operation Wembley. Gentlemen, if at all you can sit here and talk like this, but if you have ever been attacked by a thug in your house or in the car, there was a friend of mine who was attacked at his gate as he was entering in. They are kind of weapons these people come with, and they come with the purpose to kill and take. You cannot expect the police force to respond with batons.
No, but
in that context, I would like to come in from the legal point of view.
No, just a minute. Let me finish. So if at all we look at the amount of force they are using, is it proportionate to the force?
What force
Just a second, please. Now, my comrade Sanjetana has analyzed it like the real Jua Kali in this matter. No. Listen, the issue on
those are the ones I represented and I still associate with.
Please, comrade and honorable Ndugu, there is no justification for torture.
No, I'm not justifying.
No. It's what we are talking about.
No, I'm not just.
Even if someone confesses, just a second. By the way, evidence extracted from an individual
is not
after
admissible.
torture is not admissible
In a court of law.
Now, why do you go ahead to torture people?
True.
Even the threat of torture to someone would attract
I
admission.
I agree with you.
So, if you're trying to investigate a certain matter, like you said, let's say, a case in point that someone was killed and someone is picked up on the road when they are going back home from maybe a nightclub, then they tell them someone has died there, we've been told it's you. So if you get a dagger like this, then someone will say it's me to save their lives immediately there, or to save their
you get a pair of pliers and
to save themselves from the pain. Therefore, now we are discussing torture as a means of extraction of information. One, we all agree it is illegal.
True.
Secondly, we all agree it is
condemnable.
It's crude, it's unacceptable. I remember when the Congress was discussing the matter of waterboarding in the US, and everyone said, people are admitting. You remember the freeing of Guantanamo Bay prisoners?
Yes.
Very many people are convicted over nothing. Because they had to agree. I mean, you put someone's head in the water for 2 seconds,
and then pull them out.
And that's you say, I bombed. So now, as you see, every media report that is coming out, investigation after investigation is being disbanded, investigation team after the other. Therefore, there must be something that is fundamentally wrong. What Bwana Izama said is what we should carry into context. The professional CID investigative officers, where are they today? Who used to take you in, give you a cup of tea, but they exactly know what they want from you.
Mm.
You understand? Now, I was...
I'm told that is
Honorable-
dependent on orientation.
Charles,
If you follow the British
Charles,
system,
Charles.
the British system and the American
Charles,
system, they are fundamentally different. One believes
let me-
they need to bang your head against the wall,
No, no,
and then you say
Yeah,
things.
actually-
Another one,
Actually,
you nicely.
actually, the Americans also criminalized it. You can't do it anymore.
On-
Actually, when President Trump was talking about it, they stopped him. That we cannot use methods of waterboarding. They are criminalized. Even if America is not a signatory yet to the UN Convention, you know,
But they
the
have
Geneva
passed the local
Convention,
laws.
mainly Article 3, but they are local laws protect people.
Honorable Seko,
fundamentally.
maybe if I can come in with your
Just a
permission.
second, I wonder. Therefore, the issue of torture is not something we can smile about.
No, absolutely.
Picking up of kids like you saw, I mean, a 2-year-old kid.
Absolutely.
Oh, I mean, what
I just
justification
wanted to ask.
would you give in the eyes of the public
no,
that
let
this
me
guy
just
participated
throw in a
in the
comment,
murder
because-
of AIG
Sana
because
talks about the type of criminal today and the type of criminal then, and then he talks about someone being attacked at their gate, which is happening when you're applying these new methods.
Mm.
And those don't
the
seem to,
criminal
to,
even
to,
then
to be in consonance. Number two,
was terrible.
Na-
He started the case of Rex versus Amkel.
yes,
One of the first locus classicus cases in criminal law. I mean, back then they would waylay you in the dark and spear you.
yes.
But
and
also-
let me talk about
The tools they have
you try to
available is
justify
what
the
they
method.
use today.
No, I'm not justifying.
Yes.
I'm only saying
Mm.
that,
An eye for
by
an
the
eye.
way, I condemn in the strongest terms,
Mm.
like Ivan has said, that torture today, from the stories, what the media is
It only
presenting to us,
radicalizes people, actually.
that
what
the
happened.
caliber of tortures that are taking place and for the purpose for which it is done. You know, if you don't go and pin X,
Yes.
tomorrow they may pin me, they may pin Nsereko. It is wrong, and there is no one in
Charles.
his right frame of mind. Can
Looking
the
forward.
use of women, the use of kids that we saw
Yeah.
NTV
There is
breaking,
no- there is
that's
no one
that's
there.
unacceptable.
Okay,
Come
but
on.
Charles, I'm afraid I'm pressed for time.
But you know, Charles, what I'm saying is that when we talk, you know, Ugandans, we love saying, comparing ourselves to US, comparing
Wrong
ourselves to
example.
UK, comparing ourselves to China. Okay? Even in this case, if you compare our security forces to what, like he has said, Guantanamo Bay, it has been happening. And remember, there is a democracy of 130 years. Remember that this thing is still happening in China. Remember that it's happening in other
not
countries.
happening in Norway.
Now, what we want to say, even in South Africa, even in the neighborhood,
Yes,
I like the way you select your example.
so for me,
yes.
I don't
Even in
want,
South Sudan.
no, I don't want us to sit here and talk outside the box as if we are living in a perfect
You know, I love
situation.
I love the examples you select. Angela has added South Sudan. We could add
Somalia.
we could add Democratic Republic of Congo.
Can I offer-
Burundi.
Rwanda.
Some.
Can
No,
I-
he talked of Denmark
Okay.
and Norway.
These
No,
cases-
but really, we
Angela,
don't know.
Could you just hold it? You wanted to come in and then.
How do you know they are CIA?
Honorable Nsereko and indeed Angelo do speak about the need to train police officers and all this.
Absolutely.
And that's true. Even the president talks about that, and we can't have debate about that. We need to continually improve the quality of our
Train and
police
retool
officers and
ourselves.
professionals.
Yes.
That's fine. But also, the Sunday Monitor does a very interesting series, usually done by Andrew Vagal, who is a crime reporter, that essentially chronicles police operations and investigations that have yielded fruit.
Yes.
And it's an amazing job the Uganda Police Force does. I've read criminal cases and covered some in court, like the Wera and Senga case, for example, where the police has used an amazing level of science to pin people for offenses such as murder. The Akbar Godi case, for example, if you speak to the judge, Justice Gidodo, and even read the judgment, was a case of incredible intelligence and power of investigation by the police officer. And the police of Uganda, to this day, continues to do incredible investigations, both in civil and criminal spheres of life. That essentially means we have capacity to investigate professionally and get information if we need to get that information without torture. The profiles, for me, and that's my point of interest, of people who are being tortured and from the places where they're tortured is more important, because if you if
And the purpose for which they're
and the
tortured.
purpose for which they're tortured, because you
Exactly.
speak to people and they're telling you these are young Muslim boys, and for some reason there seems to be a subtle pattern. These are Muslim boys, and
Yeah.
they're being tortured and told to confess they're part of ADF. They're working with Agrechinji. They're working with this gentleman who is now in prison, Sheikh
Jamil Mukulu.
Kamoga, Jamil Mukulu. If you go back 2001, a bit of after 2001, people being tortured to confess in court. They're working with Kiza Besigye. They're working with PRA. They're working with, so that element of violating human rights essentially as a political tool and reducing the dignity of Ugandans and the right to life to a political ballgame, I think is what we need to focus on.
Thank
that
you.
essentially means
I'm afraid my time is very pressed. Angelo, you wanted to come in on this, and then we'll close
I
this
was
discussion.
saying that it's good that Ivan has amended. I thought that he was
Exactly,
he wasn't
and that's what
looking,
I
he
wanted
wasn't
to
looking
say.
at the he was looking at the trees, not the forest. The fact of the matter is, in the case of safe houses, by the way, still the media did the expose. Safe houses were declared illegal. Many of the places were closed or changed. In fact, progress, I find the government is not irresponsible but slow to respond. And I think that in this era of the last 30 years, this has occurred more. I agree that political pressures, and particularly the abuse of superior orders in the management of places of detention, by superior orders I mean this thing they call order from above, has been utilized by or misused. And I think if the IGP was really interested in correcting this matter, there should be a clear system of what superior orders are in these cases and how they are managed.
Just one quick question to you, Angelo, before you switch discussion. We need to allow one or two callers because they've been waiting on the line for long. Do you think the police can correct itself?
With public pressure. Look, the police is, despite all the money you hear that the police has, I don't think that they have enough money. I think that their training systems need help. One, the president should be advised, by the way, because I am much more closer to the prisons, because I like Seriko and the lawyers here, presumption of innocence is a very important fundamental principle in our law. Today you have got people who are serving.
The message you received. What do you do? You have tortured somebody, then you find him innocent.
Sanjay, forget about that. It is a travesty of justice that you have got people in prison serving sentences that have not been imposed by a court. You can't be on remand for 6 years. So we have told the president, why don't you just take a stock of people who have actually served illegal sentences.
Exactly, and
let them go.
That's what he said.
Let them go. Let them go. Compensate them. Empty those prisons. Start investing in a system that offers true justice.
In what political environment would that work?
Well,
maybe that's a debate we're having another day.
for more than 48
This is not rocket science.
I think the question of where the politics intersects with criminality, pure criminality, because pure criminals, like he referred to Bagala's series, pure criminals get convicted.
And the police does an amazing job.
No, but that's what I wanted to say.
Political criminals. That is what
I want to appreciate.
Ivan. Gentlemen, I'm afraid.
But there are some bad people.
The people calling us. What are the people calling us? I need to pick one or two callers. Otherwise, I'll be lynched off the show. Can I have one or two callers? Hello. Do you have someone online? Yes. Hello. Yes. You're very low. Could you speak into the microphone? Into your phone, rather.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, sir?
I'm okay.
Your name and where you're calling from? Keep your question or comment brief.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Sorry.
Yes, please. We can hear you.
Yeah, I want to ask Mr. Saj.
Yes.
We are all coming to the same situation. But I wanted to ask you, Bateso and Badama, how?
Bateso and Badama.
Yeah.
Don't you think we should have that discussion another day? Let's concentrate on Tota and yes, let's stick to the subject for today. Let's have another caller. Hello.
You have a problem there.
Hello. Hello.
It's not
yes. Hello. We have a call online. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you doing, sir?
Grace calling from Fort Portal.
Yes, please.
When you look at the recent pictures done by the police officers, actually it's a political battle between two giants. That is Afam Kaihura and Tumukunde.
Greg, do you have evidence? Do you have evidence for that allegation?
He just
No,
gave
like
us evidence.
from
Pardon?
what that gentleman said next to what I said from the
Yeah,
station.
That matter is in the High Court.
We are quoting
All those
Ivan.
facts are there.
Now, Ivan has given us.
Okay.
Yes, from what Ivan has said, like you cannot interview two or three people have been tortured and they're giving all the same information and you're saying it's not right. If a person is tortured, like, you're supposed to confess that so and so ordered me to confess that we're behind, let's say, ADF or killing someone. Then you get to know, like, if you use your common sense, then you get to know that those guys have their political struggles. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Do you have another caller? Okay, we're pressed for time, gentlemen, so I apologize. We should have had this discussion long, and of course also to our viewers, especially those trying to call us. We'll wrap this discussion up on the SIM card registration. And I'm just going to ask each one of you to give their
Well, my
your own views. And,
my two phone lines have been
you've been cut off. Yes.
Of course, as someone who I've been a long supporter of reducing the asymmetries of information, having a credible database, both for, of course, security, but also both for trade and other things. But I disagreed with the way the government went about it. There was an easier way. In fact, they could simply have asked the mobile phone companies to act as agents of their own, issue these national IDs to everyone, mobilize the LC system if they wanted, required, LC everyone in their locality to, to be issued with an ID. An ID, just like a passport, is something that the government continues to own, and it's a document that even if you have it, it's a government document. So they shouldn't impose a cost or whatever on you. They are now self-inflicted wounds. He has a bill that he's proposing, which has to do with a government bailout. The cost of this switch-off on the economy is unjustifiable. Yeah.
I've seen one estimate putting it at 613 million.
It's
630 million per day.
30 million per day.
Per day.
Yeah, it's unjustifiable and it is unnecessary.
Okay.
And by the way, they say that it is meant for security purposes. I don't know whether they can come back and say, okay, has crime reduced as a result of this? Is nonsense.
Yeah, yes, Mohammed Nsereko. One is Parliament actually passed a bill, passed a resolution, and you're demanding that the Minister for ICT comes and makes, he's acted in contempt of Parliament by authorizing going ahead with the switch off.
Absolutely.
On midnight of 19.
There is no question about that because it was part of Parliament. Honorable Sanjay knows it. We take resolutions together, and if you're defeated in Parliament, there is no way you can go against Parliament because he would have said, I'm not part of Parliament. But if you're part, there was a government side, the executive, and there were backbenchers. The debate was carried out, government gave its position, and a resolution was passed. Therefore, he cannot come out and say that I'm not bound by that resolution.
And some people have spoken to argue that you're being populist as Parliament to push for this after government 2 years ago started a registration, a nationwide registration exercise. Number two, started this and warned against, warned about the verification, gave an extension of 1 month, and then on the eve, you passed a resolution.
Just a second.
Yes.
It was on the 12th of April, I remember, I think. That's when the security chief sat with the CEO of UCC and came up with a 7-day ultimatum for all Uganda. Excuse me, 7 days is not... I mean, I don't know how you analyze it.
Then
but don't worry. We came up and challenged that. I practically went to help people in queues.
Yes.
Who did not even know where their IDs were, others had registered. Now listen, in modern societies, you don't look at the bulk you have, you look at the inconvenience that you may cause. That's why when Trump was talking about the Muslim ban, you saw it as something light, that it was going to only keep out about thousands of people. But in a modern society, they come out to even fight for that thousandth person, including the person who had a visa or who was going to be issued a visa. But let's come back to our common ground here. Now, you're talking about a registration system, a verification system for registered users of phones. Now, who are those that had registered? People that were supposed to be above 16 by 2030.
That's for national ID.
That's for national. And how do you get a NIN?
Yes.
Unless you've registered for a national ID, that's the only way you get the NIN number. Now, the presumption is that a person to own a mobile phone
Must be.
should be 16 and above, which is a wrong presumption. Secondly, for those that had lost their national IDs, were to get replacements at a cost of 50,000. Assuming this person is in Kanungu and stays, let's say, in Cheshero, and has to move to the sub-county headquarters in Chihihi, that's about 16 kilometers. If it's a border, it's about 10,000 to and fro to get your fingerprints taken, to get your photos taken, to get a new replacement. And in a country where people have been dying of hunger, you ask for 50,000 for replacement of a card to a person in Katakwi or in Arua for a document that we've approved.
But how many are those?
Just a second.
Yes.
There are thousands. There are thousands.
What
He has been talking of burglars.
What about those who failed to do a simple SMS?
Just a second.
A star 197 in the comfort of their bed when they're watching on popcorn.
Can I finish this?
And watching
there are
TV.
thousands of
But how
people.
many are those?
Just a second.
And
There are
there was-
thousands of people who have just attained the age of 16 or 18 and own mobile phones, and they are part of the grid, and they are part of the taxpayers.
And they have mobile money.
And you well, even if they didn't even have mobile money, I'm trying to tell you for things that they did not provide for. We talked about this.
What
Just a second.
didn't happen? Because no,
Can I
just
continue?
My time is out. I need to get out of here, yes.
Because I want to give you a pure justification for this. Do you know how many people are sick and they are bedridden and probably they lost their national IDs? Do you know how many people are people with disabilities? I'm the chairperson of the Equal Opportunities Committee in Parliament. How many district headquarters where you have these machines of registration could even cater for those people with disabilities?
But sure, Honorable.
No, I'm trying to tell you the
People
reality.
are not in the ICU.
Well,
no. If people are not in ICU in hospitals,
just a second.
I mean, they're in hospitals,
Just
but they're
a second.
WhatsApping.
Just a second.
Yes.
Just a second.
They're Facebooking.
You see, you're looking at the small community that is using the smartphone. I'm looking at the small Itesot who doesn't even know the translation of what it messages.
I was looking at the debate
of
in
the
Parliament.
messages you're sending
And the
in
breakdown
English
wasn't there.
that press star 197, put in your name. Do you know how many literate people are there? You're talking of people to type their names. Have you put that into consideration?
We stay there.
You do not stay
How do
there.
you move forward?
The issue is you extend the time, and the issue
Until
is
when?
the question I'm asking you: why the rush? This should be the question.
Yes.
And people are imputing security. You see, when you're bluffed by security, that's why there is torture that he's been talking about, because you're easily bluffed when someone comes out and says, this is a security matter. You see, when it is security, don't comment.
It denies civilians the right to
It
comment.
overrides your rights. By the way, you're giving my entire biodata to a private company, to a mobile phone user. Tomorrow, we have hackers in the world. He's living in a modern economy, and we've been discussing about this. Do you know that the NH system, the National Health Service system of the UK and in Europe, was hacked in the last week?
Yes.
Do you know that for someone to get your date of birth, they can hack your account, they can hack everything of yours, and they can take money even from your mobile phone?
Okay.
For as long as
I think you make your point.
So,
I'm afraid our time
as I'm winding
is
up,
really out.
our justification should be the reverse question. Why the rush? Take it slowly. Let everyone register, even for a span of the year. Because these people are justifying it in criminality. And let me ask you one question. Assuming people were roaming on numbers of DRC Congo here and committing crime. He and I roam on DRC numbers and we commit the crime. Therefore, we should not be reactive. That the issue of AIGP Kawesa and his death should be reactive to inconvenience
I hear you on that.
That is absolutely.
I do not think registration, this is my personal opinion, I do not think this registration of phones
Really?
is going to help reduce crime.
So why the rush?
The question is, until the late Aronda Nyakairema pushed and insisted on the period for registration for the national IDs, Ugandans always want to...
Their rush
wait
was
the
for a
last minute.
compilation
Yes.
of a national
Charles.
register for
Okay.
election.
Thank you.
No,
You
true.
actually got it wrong.
Your take.
I want to start from where he has stopped. Why the rush? Because you cannot give me 1 week when you as the government has not made a plan
Yes.
on how to handle all the mobile money users
Yes.
that are on the grid
Congratulations.
and do not have
Why is it
national
just people?
identification. You did not create awareness that we are coming with this. Please go and register.
Translation.
You have not
You think it's a
created
joke.
an option for those that are on roaming, like he has said, and are out of the country,
Serving
but
soldiers in Somalia.
have mobile money tills operating
And
and
so on.
sending money to Uganda. Number 4,
Is on.
on the issue of registration, we should not hoodwink behind security.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you one thing. I was on the floor of Parliament, and I'm on record.
Yes.
Driving permit. We were fooled. We were told that once you go, you put
You
your
will get
fingerprint
security.
and
We will
put your
get them.
and your photograph. Then when you go for renewal, you don't have to go back to. It
It's
will
all
be a
the process.
database.
Where is
It's
that
going to
data?
be where is that data? Now they have even stopped giving you the credit card like thing. They give you a laminated.
One with a chip.
Okay. Now that data is on its own. Then the land registry started collecting the same data. Then the passport office collects the same data. Remember, many people
Even
who are
the
registered,
the
all these
census.
same cards are registered on voting card
Yes.
or on passports or on ID. Now we are being forced to use only ID.
You forgot something.
No, just a minute. Let me build my
Yes.
point. The same data is at the passport office. The same data was collected during voters register. Now, this data, we at that time, on the floor of Parliament, and I asked this
That's
question,
true.
and I said,
Unbelievable.
why don't we collect a national data bank?
Yes.
Where then, me, the one person, do not have to go every time to stand in a queue and put my fingerprints and my photograph.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
to come out to the element, this issue, we should not hoodwink behind security. We must be very clear and give Ugandans time. I appreciate that the database must be aligned. I appreciate the push for the national identification. Let me tell you, by the way, 1.2 million Ugandans registered within that 1 week. But their names are going to come out after 2 months.
Absolutely.
They lined up in hope of getting the names.
Okay.
And for
But the
information,
names are going to
just
come
one
after 2
information.
months.
Thank you.
Just one information, my brother.
So
As
your
you wind
system
up.
is not
Just
ready.
a
Then
second.
why are you
I'm afraid.
pushing
Just a
for
second.
cut-off?
Assuming someone is
What is the
deceased,
objective?
This is just a logical
What
question.
is the objective for the
Assuming
cut-off?
someone is dead, someone in the home picks their ID and verifies their phone with the deceased, goes commits a crime. What happens?
You've given people a tip, but it's just
No, it's not a tip.
Yes.
We are saying that
no,
it was
no,
clear.
no, we are
I met
saying-
someone today who
Yes.
said, but then you're struggling with this thing.
Just
go,
get
go
to-
and get just register in another.
Do you see on, just a second. Do you see on internet
Can-
lost and found national IDs? People are just going there to look for winners at games. They read the name, just type in and get verified.
You have 10 seconds.
The criminal is always smarter than you.
The three gentlemen have exuded impeccable passion and raised
We
very
are
valid
just giving
issues.
our views.
And raised very valid issues. My personal view is possibly part of the problem is the void in participatory decision making, because all the issues that they're raising should have been captured and dealt with at the earliest opportunity. If
right.
we had
To prepare.
a culture of participatory decision making,
I saw the
that's
ICT
one.
minister,
That's
Frank,
one.
promoting, the president actually said he stands by the deadline.
But,
But what they did not say is that they dragged the head of state in a totally unnecessary.
But
Gentlemen,
Chelsea number two.
gentlemen,
Number two. Lastly,
we're stretching the discussion.
Yes.
I'm afraid we got to bring it to an end.
Yes.
I just wanted to add my voice to what Tana said. This multiple centers where private information is available. Yes. You have this information. You have this information with this.
NIRA.
No, the bank card, the bank
Yeah,
card.
the
Yes.
card.
Yeah, the
CRB.
credit rate card.
Yes, credit card. You have this information with internal affairs. You have this information with
The
when we
passport
registered for
is
mobile
not-
money.
Yes.
You have this information with and you keep wondering why can't government put its act together,
but Charles,
collect all this information and then use it.
Charles, all those
without
issues,
even a
gentlemen,
home
all
address
those,
system.
all those issues taken
Gentlemen,
home.
our time
We
is
also,
out.
as
We
a
can't
country,
even vote
we
for
also as a
LCs and we
country,
are just asking
we
for
also as a
50
country
billion.
need to develop a culture of sticking to rules, but
Yeah.
more importantly, sticking to deadlines.
And I have
There is a lot of complacence.
Gentlemen,
You absolutely
we're
wrong.
stretching the discussion.
For a pay as you go line in the UK, you just come in and buy
Thank
a
you very
line.
much. Thank you very much,
Don't
Angelo.
confuse
Thank you very much,
people.
Muhammad.
You buy
Member of
Libra, you
Parliament.
buy Libra. You don't
Member
need
of
to
Parliament for
register.
Kampala Central. Thank you very much, Sanjay Tana, businessman and former member of Parliament. Thank you very much, Ivan Okuda, journalist and law student. Thank you very much to you all our viewers for joining us tonight and always, and a wonderful production crew that stays up late to deliver the fourth estate to you. From me, it's a good night.